You are listening to Paranormal King Radio Network. The paranormal will never be the same again.
Paranormal King Radio Network has the best hosts and guests the paranormal has to offer. Every weekday, Mondays, 8 Eastern, Delaware Paranormal Princess Radio with Melissa Overton from the Paranormal Investigators of Delaware. Tuesday, 9 Eastern, Paranormalities Ponderings with the teacher Frank Lee from Central Alabama Society for Paranormal Investigations and Research. Wednesdays, 8 Eastern, Paranormal Experience with Catherine Hobson from Spirit Communications and Research, Alabama. Thursday, 8 Eastern, Paranormal King Radio with the Paranormal King himself, Ross Rapaza. Fridays, 8 p.m., Paraversal Universe with Kevin Malik and Jennifer Schlesing from Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society. Fridays, 11 Eastern, Dead Creek Radio, live with myself, Will Pritchard from Dead Creek Paranormal. We strive to bring you the best paranormal stories in an educational, informative, and entertaining manner, only on Paranormal King Radio Network, where the paranormal will never be the same again.
You are listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team. Brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network and hosted by Frank Lee. Join us for the next hour as we discuss ghosts, spirits, hauntings, and otherworldly phenomena that has yet to be explained in the hopes of finding answers. This show is meant to be a resource for those of you who, like us, seek to find answers to the unknown. We hope you find it informative and enjoy the show. And once again, thank you for listening.
Thank you for tuning in to Paranormalities and Ponderings. I'm your host, Frank Lee. We've got an extra special guest for you tonight on the show. It's going to be a very educational show, very informative, and I'm extremely excited about it tonight. It's going to be quite a different format from what you're used to. We're not talking about ghosts, we're not talking about aliens, vampires, demons, any of the typical subject matters you would hear on a paranormal show. Instead, we're going for something more of the educational nature. And without giving too much of the information away, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest, Stephen Myers. Stephen, how are you tonight?
Very good. Thank you, Frank, for having me on your show.
Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on tonight. And you've been doing quite a bit of research on the Great Pyramid and how it was built and why, and your idea is quite different from any that I've seen, and like we were talking about earlier, it makes so much more sense than any of the other theories. But before we get into that, I was going to ask you, what really got you into researching Egypt and the pyramids, and how did that come about?
Well, I've always been interested in technology. When I was in high school, when we studied World War II, I was more interested in the battleships and the airplanes than I was in the generals or the leaders of different countries, and I enjoy technology. Most of my educational background is of a technical nature, and I enjoy history too. Mm-hmm. So if a person enjoys technology and history, their focus will ultimately be directed towards the Great Pyramid because it's a highly technical structure. In fact, a skyscraper that was built in ancient times.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I read a few books about Egyptology and the Great Pyramid, trying to understand technical issues about it, not who the gods were, not what language they spoke, not what the hieroglyphs are about, or any of that, but just the technical issues of the Great Pyramid. So, of course, I read books by Egyptologists, and they made some rather remarkable claims talking about this great big ramp that people with strong backs were able to drag very heavy stones up and set them in place without handling scars or anything like that. And I thought, oh, that makes sense in a way. All I have to do is validate it through finding out about their demonstrations. And then Egyptology books talk about how the extremely precise stone cutting was accomplished by hand. Okay, that sounds good to me. Use hand tools and cut the stones to extreme precision. And in my early days of researching the Great Pyramid, I actually wanted to see the demonstrations that they used to validate their ideas. But I found out something that it isn't in any book about Egyptology. It isn't any Egyptologist will tell you, and that is there are no demonstrations.
Right.
They have never moved a payload the size of the largest stones of the Great Pyramid 1 inch. It's never been Egyptology, who says they know how it was done by working people and peasants. These highly educated people can't even move the heaviest stones 1 inch.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Since the beginning of Egyptology till today, it's never been done. Oh, okay. Well, what about make a casing stone? These are the stones that were on the outside of the Great Pyramid. Most of them are gone now. But just make one, and then it's never been done.
Right.
There's 7 billion people on Earth, and everybody's doing something. Nobody's made a casing stone the way Egyptologists say it was done. And I think there's one main reason, and that is the method that they say it was done is an impossibility.
Right. And you being so grounded in the technology and the scientific side of it, you, like me, you're looking for that. You want to see that replicability of it. You want to see it in action, those repeatable steps to prove that theory, and it doesn't exist.
Egyptology claims to be a science. Sciences use the scientific method. Egyptology will not use the scientific method to validate their stories.
Right.
And if you don't learn anything else from this broadcast, that's the one thing that you should know to start off with. It's undemonstratable, if you will. What if there was a science called cow jumping over the moonology? And they talked about cows jumping over the moon. You can find it in literature. You can find it in oral stories about cows jumping over the moon and everything. And what if somebody says, hey, maybe we can put a satellite in space and save some money using cows jumping over the moon? Well, we can't demonstrate that, but we're a science. We're going to teach this in colleges. If they can't even get a casing stone right, what else do you think they've got wrong? Probably the sequence of pyramid construction, certainly how it was done. Never moved a stone around the corner of a spiral ramp. Never been done.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just strange. Egyptology is kind of like phrenology was at the beginning of the 20th century. Phrenology is the study of the bumps on your head and how it relates to your psychosis and your personality traits. And they taught it in college, the turn of the 20th century, and there were books and there were people that studied it and everything else. The only thing is, there was a problem with phrenology. It could not withstand the rigors of the scientific method. And Egyptology is in a very similar crisis right now. They're willing to declare edicts that we're supposed to believe, and it's like a priesthood, if you will. The young Egyptologists are told something, and then they end up in the front of the classroom telling the next generation, as opposed to a science.
Right.
So it's a strange situation, and it certainly leads to a lot of controversy about how the Great Pyramid was built, and a lot of people are certainly offering alternative ideas to their idea.
Absolutely. And you bring up such a good point there, because the thing that has always baffled me is, I can understand the limited methods during those times, but today with our modern equipment, our modern methods, look at what we can do with excavation and construction now.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we? Why have we not figured out some way to test these theories?
Absolutely. They are. They're not testable.
Mm-hmm.
That means that they don't have a falsifiability, if you will. And in the scientific method, if something can't be falsified, if it can't be verified in the negative, if you will, then it can't be verified. And these things, like these ideas that Egyptology has come up with, cannot be verified using the scientific method. So it's a strange world. There's other ideas instead of a big ramp. And I've actually written a couple of books about the Great Pyramid. The first book is Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, and it's about how the Great Pyramid was assembled. Mm-hmm. And our contention is that it was assembled using water locks, like those in the Erie Canal or the Panama Canal, that type of technology. And they used those water locks, and the stones were on barges that went from the Nile River all the way up to the building site. A lot of the quarries are across the river from the Great Pyramid, so everyone acknowledges that the stones were on barges at least part of the time. But I contend that the original builders were geniuses and were able to move those stones on barges
mm-hmm.
up the series of water locks all the way to the building site.
And that's such a unique theory, because that's one that I personally have never heard before, and I'm sure that the people listening, I'm sure that very few of them have ever heard anything similar to that. But it's so unique, but it makes so much sense, because if you look at how efficient a barge is for moving a great load of weight across the channel, and not only that, but looking at the Nile and the amount that it has, the Nile used to be much bigger than it was. It used to go much farther inland.
Yes, actually the course of the Nile has changed quite a bit through the millennium, and that is true. But there's also a lot of evidence specific to the Great Pyramid, which indicates that they used water as a means to transport stones. The casing stones that I were talking about are cut to extreme precision, and they're quite large, but they're also cemented together watertight. The casing stones that are still at the Great Pyramid are watertight to this day, cemented together with a very strong bonding agent. And imagine, if you will, just the first layer of casing stones set in place. That would make a square wall up on the Giza Plateau. And if you fill that square wall up with water and had water locks from the Nile all the way up to the building site, where they could enter, the barges could enter that pond and move an interior stone to wherever it was going to go and remove it from the barge and set it right into the pond. And when the pond is filled up with stones, then the first level of the Great Pyramid would be completed.
Right. So and essentially move it in, and as you get this first level, you would already have your water level completed. So then it essentially would function as a lock, wouldn't it at that point?
Yes. Then you would place the next layer of casing stones on top of the first layer and add additional water so that the water level is as high as the second layer of casing stones, and build another water lock in the side of the casing stones, built into the casing stones, if you will. And then the stones on barges could move again all the way up to that second level and transport the stones right to where they were going to be placed. The Erie Canal, when built, was a canal that was 4.5 feet deep, but the barges had a capacity of 70 tons.
Wow.
So it's quite interesting. Also, the Erie Canal here in the United States was able to move the weight of the Great Pyramid higher than the Great Pyramid in a period of 2 years.
Wow.
So canals are very powerful, and they're also very fast, certainly faster than Egyptology, because if the Great Pyramid was to be built by Egyptologists, it would have never been built.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, we've seen the theory that you've suggested. We've seen it tested. We've seen it proven through the use of canals, through every day. Every time you see a barge enter a lock inside a dam, the theory that you're proposing is proven.
Yes, it's been demonstrated millions of times. In fact, water locks are a technology of choice for the 21st century, and they are being used in the Panama Canal is being enlarged with newer, bigger water locks. So how modern man in the real world actually moves their heaviest payloads in the 21st century is by using water locks, because it's a modern technology. But I think that in ancient times, the geniuses who were able to assemble the Great Pyramid also used water barges and water locks to assemble their ancient wonder of the world.
Right. So during this construction, now just to kind of recap this for everyone listening, as they've put in this canal going to the construction site, and they have this metered flow that they're controlling through this system of locks, and as they encase one layer, they allow it to fill with water, and then they encase another layer, so then they increase the water flow, and as it rises, of course, the layers get smaller in area to accommodate the decreasing area as the pyramid gets more narrow toward the top. But essentially, they're building the channel as they go and just increasing the water to reach it. There's no scaffolds, no extremely tall scaffolds, nothing being done from the outside on these huge aerial lifts or anything that, like a lot of theories have supported, it's not UFOs beaming materials up from a site and putting them in place with the tractor beam.
Right.
So,
and there's also no big ramp that is bigger than the pyramid itself. On our website, that we have, which is www.thepump.org, that website has a link to a video series, and people can check out that video series, which is free, of course, but it also shows the detailed procedure on how this theory operated to construct the Great Pyramid, how the barges were used, how specialized barges were used to move the stones on and off of other barges, and how the construction was like a production line, if you will, how it was very fast, how the water locks are placed along the side of the Great Pyramid, built right into the casing stones, and it even shows how the largest stones were moved and set in place, as well as how the capstone was set in place. So there's been a lot of interest in our video series with the computer-generated animations, and I hope all your listeners go to our website at thepump.org to watch that video series.
Absolutely. I've looked around on the site, and it's fascinating. I've got a couple of questions from the chat room that I was going to ask you. I've got one here. Kat was asking if there are any hieroglyphics found to support the theory.
There are no formal hieroglyphics on the Great Pyramid.
Wow.
There are some quarry marks that are in little cavities that were inaccessible until they were busted into in the 1830s. So no, there's no hieroglyphs of any kind on the Great Pyramid other than the informal graffiti marks or quarry marks.
Wow.
In those cavities.
And that is something that I didn't know, so that's quite fascinating.
Much of the temples and tombs in the Valley of the Nile are covered head to toe with writings, hieroglyphs, pictographs, writings all over them. But the Great Pyramid is devoid of any hieroglyphs inside the Great Pyramid or outside, but most of the outside has been removed, but none on the inside. Supposedly in the King's Chamber, they call it, there's no hieroglyphs. None in the Queen's Chamber or the Grand Gallery. So, you want to know why?
Why is that?
Because the builders didn't want any hieroglyphs in there. Didn't need them. That wasn't part of it.
Wow. That is fascinating. That is something that I'd never known. But then again, though, that's so common of a misconception. I would assume, because when you see it, you see the inside view of so many of the temples and everything else.
Yes,
it's easy to automatically assume that they're going to be in the pyramid as well.
That's a good point. There's a lot of misconceptions, but here we are in the 21st century, in the age of information, and then there's all of this confusion, misconceptions on documentaries about that Egyptologists put out. They'll show the face or the mask of King Tut, and then they'll show a pyramid. No mummies were found in any pyramids in Egypt.
Wow.
Certainly some may have been removed in the thousands of years that transpired from ancient times till now, maybe, but there have been none in any Egyptian pyramid found. So that's just a little factoid that people might be interested in. The kings and the pharaohs, they were not really buried. The burial tombs that you see aren't in pyramids. They're in holes in the ground in the Valley of the Kings, which is off a ways from where the Great Pyramid is anyway.
Right. Because if I understand it correctly, most of the pyramids are on the Giza Plateau.
There's 3 major pyramids and quite a few smaller pyramids that are on the Giza Plateau. But up and down the bank of the Nile, there are a number of other pyramids, the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid and a few others. But specifically on the Giza Plateau, there's the 3 large ones and then several satellite pyramids, if you want to call them that, or Queen's pyramids.
Right.
That are pretty small, and even on the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid is made with exquisite precision, but the other pyramids aren't made with that same level of precision.
So it almost would make you wonder if they were made using the exact same construction method, or what was the difference in the precision?
That's true. They may have been made. Even the pyramids on the Giza Plateau may have been made in a different manner, assembled in a different manner. They may have been even assembled in a huge time frame distance, not within generations, but maybe a big time frame difference. That's a possibility.
Right.
And also assembled by even different civilizations. These are all possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of mystery involved about the pyramids in general and the Great Pyramid itself in particular.
Absolutely. And I've got another question from the chat room. Now, this one is about the Sphinx, that about if it's true that its left paw has a tomb in it, and what was believed to be in it, if you were familiar with that.
I am actually familiar with stories that the Sphinx may be above the Hall of Records from ancient times that has ancient scrolls and that type of thing, but there's no pictures. There's no photographs of any of that, and a lot of that is speculation that is not really founded in any type of real direct physical evidence. But it's fun to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It definitely adds to the mystery, because there is so much involved when there's any discussion of ancient Egypt. And another question that I had was if the Great Pyramid was the only known structure without any documentation such as hieroglyphs or whatever on the inside.
Well, there's other pyramids, and some pyramids have some writing in them, and some pyramids don't. So and there's also speculation if the writing was actually done by the same people that built the pyramid. So there's a lot of research in that area, and also some scholarly debate as to who built them, and also who put the markings in the ones that have the markings. So I try to take the least amount of things for granted, or I try to make the least amount of presuppositions, and I'm also very wary of anything that I read in a book about Egyptology, to be honest with you. I'm very, very wary of it. Sciences change, and sciences come and go, believe it or not. And I think that Egyptology and people, read their books and that type of thing, has perpetuated a lot of misconceptions about the pyramids, and they've offered preconceived notions that they have presented as fact. So that has led to a lot of the confusion about Egypt, ancient Egypt in general, and the pyramids specifically. I would say that Egyptology has been more of a hindrance than a help in understanding the truth.
Absolutely. But because it's one of those things that if you look at it, I absolutely agree about science being fluid. I've used the example many times on the show that just 500 years ago, the Earth was the center of the universe, and everything rotated around us. And 1,000 years ago, the Earth was flat, and if you went too far, you would fall off.
Yes.
So what we know as scientific fact today can completely change tomorrow. So
I agree with that. I do, very much so.
That is one thing that I believe wholeheartedly in, and I believe that that's going to be the key to people understanding a lot with the paranormal side of the house and it becoming mainstream. But like you had mentioned, the preconceived notions that have been passed down, I would agree with that, because if something has been accepted as fact and it's written down, and I see this on websites that have different facts or different information, maybe it's used as a reference website. Well, when someone does their research on a particular subject, they go to that website and they'll mix the information they find on this website with that preconceived information, even though it may be incorrect, along with a couple of others, and they combine it to form their own. And even though the wording is different, it's still the same information, and it's being passed down and passed down. And that's exactly what you see going on. That's like you're mentioning with the Egyptology. And it really takes something that is groundbreaking and completely new and foreign to break that cycle.
Absolutely. And that there has been revolutions of understanding in the past. The Middle Ages ended with the I've lost it. The revolution of thought at the end of the Middle Ages, and then but I think right now we're on a cusp of a new understanding, both of distant past and of science, and also even spirituality. And we are in an exciting time. We're going to shed away a lot of the old notions that have been accepted as fact, and we're going to find new understandings for a whole host of things besides, pyramids, technology, energy, psychology, and again spirituality. So it's an exciting time. But this Great Pyramid was built by these ancient geniuses, and it had a purpose in mind. They built this massive structure. It was the tallest structure for at least 45 centuries, and built on solid bedrock with monumentally huge components, and they built it for a purpose. And I think that they built it as an investment, not at a great cost, but at a wise investment, because the Great Pyramid was built to be infrastructure for the civilization that built it. It was built not for the dead, but for the living. That the Great Pyramid was built as a machine that functioned, and this machine provided prosperity for the civilization that built it. And what this machine did, what the Great Pyramid was built for, was to be a water pump.
Wow.
The largest structure in North America and the largest structure in the world when built was the Grand Coulee Dam in central Washington. It's on the Columbia River. Anyway, that dam makes a lot of hydroelectricity, but its primary purpose was that of irrigation. It irrigates about 1 million acres in central Washington, and it turned the desert into a garden.
Right.
And most people eat food that has been irrigated by water that was pumped by this massive water pump. And that the Grand Coulee Dam is a water pump that operates differently than the Great Pyramid water pump. But in ancient times, mankind built this huge structure to be a massive water pump to provide prosperity, just in a way that modern times we have done the same thing. The largest structure in the valley of the Nile is the High Aswan Dam, and it makes electricity, but the electricity is used to pump water to irrigate the fields. So the High Aswan Dam is in effect the cornerstone of a massive irrigation system. So in modern times in the valley of the Nile, they built a big machine to pump water to provide prosperity, and I think they did the same thing in ancient times.
Well, and that's a fascinating theory. And once again, that is the first time that I've heard that approach. I've heard people talk about that it was a tomb, that it was a shrine, that it was everything else. But here it is, you're saying that it was used as a direct infrastructure, that a functioning water pump that's going to support the civilization, and it doesn't seem that far-fetched. I mean, just a few centuries after, we know that the Roman Empire, we know that they had running hot and cold water just a few centuries after the pyramids.
They did. They had a lot of technology in ancient Roman times, and they also had some high technology in Egypt. They had the Baghdad battery, those little clay jars that people have recreated. Not Egyptologists. They won't do it. But just other people, technically inclined people, recreate these ancient artifacts and pour either grape juice or lemon juice in them, and they produce the, a half a volt of electricity.
Right.
So, it's fascinating. And, of course, some of the... all kinds of ancient technology. Large-scale precision stone cutting cannot be done by hand, but whoever built the Great Pyramid was able to accomplish that. So they had some fascinating methods to move heavy payloads, to produce stone cutting, and also there's ideas of electricity in ancient Egypt and other things that we can't even imagine. So it's an incredible structure. That's for sure.
And something else that I'm not sure if you're familiar with my background or not. I actually have some formal training in water operations and water treatment.
Wow.
And so as you're mentioning this, I'm analyzing the mechanics of it, and it would actually make sense, because if you look at the height of the Great Pyramid, and you have its placement, for every 2.31 feet of elevation, you gain 1 psi of water pressure. But something critical in any type of water point or water storage unit, of course, everyone is familiar with the shafts coming out of the pyramid that line up with, if I'm not mistaken, one lines up with Orion. Is that correct?
That's what they tell me.
And I remember, if I remember correctly, there were two. One lined up with Orion, and I can't remember what the other constellation that the other one was supposed to line up with. But
well, yeah, those shafts. We contend were the King's Chamber shafts specifically were the output of the Great Pyramid water pump, and the input was the descending passage. The Great Pyramid has a whole bunch of passages and chambers, kind of quite complex inside, and those operated using sliding stones that are in slots that acted like valves, and it operated as a water pump. So, and then the output went up the King's Chamber vents, but just to gain pressure. That's why they went up. But then our contention is that the output water went back down through passages, small passages that were in the casing stones. Right. And then ultimately the water was delivered to where it was used, either for irrigation or to power machinery or to create compressed air or do a whole host of things. We see the Giza Plateau as more of a science center than a graveyard. So, so that's what we contend, and that's why the interior of the Great Pyramid is so complex and with a number of moving stones. How do long open passages with sliding stones at the end detour tomb robbers?
Right.
Nobody knows. Ask an Egyptologist after he sit in classroom for 6 years and ask him that question. He'll just look at you funny. Long open passages with sliding stones to protect the golden treasure. I'm not sure how that was supposed to work.
Right. It would seem to me if there was a treasure in there, it would be gone well before then. But it does make sense though to function as a water pump, because you have the elevation, you have especially if you have, like you had mentioned, the shaft being as an output, because you have that cylindrical form, that pressurizing form near the output that's going to increase the pressure. You have the elevation that's going to create the pressure drop, or the pressure increase as the elevation drops. It
seems to make sense to a lot of people, and the direct physical evidence supports this idea. There was what they call Nile earth, or mud sediment, found inside the passages and chambers. There was deposits on the walls of the Queen's Chamber and the lower part of the Grand Gallery that are like deposits on the walls, like a stain, if you will. So there's ideas about water. The chambers are built watertight with great precision, not to keep the Pharaoh's soul from leaking out, but to keep the chambers watertight. And my second book, The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine, it talks a lot about how this very complex water pump worked, and how the water moved through the passages and chambers and ultimately was pumped. And it talks about the purpose that the water was used for, and also that it's ancient but high technology that needs to be redeveloped for our modern but very troubled world.
Right. So this was actually quite an investment that they were looking at, that's setting up an infrastructure for future generations. Yes.
Just like we have invested quite an investment, like in our road system or our power grid or a whole host of other types of infrastructure. And then it's that infrastructure that provides us with the wealth that we have here in the United States, the prosperity. The infrastructure is an investment for that prosperity. We have farms that have a guaranteed amount of water in the Pacific Northwest because of the Grand Coulee Dam. We have electricity so people can run factories because of our hydroelectric dams and that type of thing. That's why we have prosperity. And the ancients had the same idea of providing prosperity for their civilization with the infrastructure. So that's what the direction of my research is. Not about what gods did they pray to, or because the gods didn't move the stones. There's nothing to do with their language or their clothing style or a king's list or pyramid text or Book of the Dead. None of that has any relationship to the construction of this large structure. So we try to focus it on an engineering project, if you will, and understand how it was built and also why it was built.
Absolutely. And something that it makes you wonder is from the research that you've done, what type of delivery system have you seen, or would you imagine has been put in place to get the water from the pyramid out into the different sites within Giza and within the various sites throughout Egypt?
The ancient historian Herodotus, when he was eyewitness to the Great Pyramid, talked about an artificial duct that was connected to the Great Pyramid that went, he wasn't for sure where it went. So part of it might have been underground, or it might have been beyond where he could see where it went. But Herodotus talked about this artificial duct, and we think that was part of the delivery system from the Great Pyramid water pump to other locations where the water was being used.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. It's amazing. And the thing of it is, it makes you wonder.
It does.
Why has no one else grasped onto this and looked into it?
Well, I appreciate that. One more thing about Herodotus. He described the Great Pyramid as being like an island surrounded by water. Up until the 18th century, there was a wall, an enclosure wall around the Great Pyramid, and we believe that impounded water. And both of my books discuss that wall and how it was impounded. So, like a pond, if you will, a square pond with a big island in the middle. But yeah, the idea is so controversial. A lot of people think that it's not a special enough purpose for the Great Pyramid, that the Great Pyramid is just too awesome to be just a water pump or anything. Well, if those people that had that opinion were hungry and wanted to irrigate their land, they would certainly think that the Great Pyramid as a water pump would be very special. But a lot of people are interested in the gods or what the mummies look like and that type of thing. And a lot of people, to be honest with you, and it's fine, don't have the technical orientation about the structure. They just look at it and say profound or whatever. But I like battleships. How they were built and everything, and I like skyscrapers. It's a fascinating study about a skyscraper, but most people, they just would like to go to the top of the Empire State Building and look around. But how it was built, how it was funded, why it was built, that type of stuff is interesting to me. But just like yourself, there's just every day the interest is growing. The interest in my books is growing. They are available in both softcover and Kindle ebook, so people can download them essentially before the show is over. So the interest is growing. We also have a nonprofit foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit foundation recognized by the federal government to conduct research and development for this ancient technology, and we think that it's a efficient and energy efficient, but also clean water pumping system that would have applications in our modern world. I'm not saying people need to build a stone pyramid, but they can use PVC pipe and valves and polypropylene enclosures and adapt this ancient high technology so that people can in the United States, the first use would be to generate electricity. If you have water that you can elevate very cheaply, you can use that to generate electricity. So but also reduce the cost of farming for especially marginal farmland, and a whole host of other things. Even use the technology to move water from an area that has too much water, like the Netherlands or whatever, and that is an application that we're pursuing, to move it out type of thing. So that's what we're doing. We're doing this technology-oriented understanding of this technical structure. And again, our website is thepump.org. So you can visit our website. You can like us on Facebook. You can send us an email or contact us. You can find out our mission statement and our goals. We have frequently asked questions. And you can see what we're about and that type of thing. And, of course, all donations are tax deductible.
So that's fascinating. And so something that I'm particularly curious about is, from your research, what would you consider to be the power source to operate the pump? Or what would you consider to be what really put it into motion and kept it going?
Excellent question. Actually, the Great Pyramid has a chamber below the Great Pyramid, about 100 feet below. There's a large chamber, and it is built in solid bedrock. And we think that chamber and associated passages worked similar to, but different than, a hydraulic ram water pump. The movement of the water caused water to be pumped up. And it's that water that was able to provide water for those ponds impounded by casing stones. And that water was able to supply the water locks that were used to build the Great Pyramid. But the Great Pyramid itself was also a water pump. So it was two water pumps end to end that are connected in series. And the top water pump, it used, our contention was that it separated hydrogen and oxygen from water that was already in the chamber using electrolysis. And there's a whole, the book is actually a little bit technical, but it describes all of that with illustrations and everything. And then if you ignite hydrogen and oxygen in an enclosed chamber like the Grand Gallery and exhaust the gases, if you will, through a check valve, then you will create a vacuum. And there's actually a few devices in the modern world that does that. Specifically, the Humphrey pump down in Australia uses combustion to make a vacuum, which draws water up. And then, anyway, that's how we think that the Grand Gallery operated, and it lifted a column of water. In fact, what is known as a water piston, lifted it up high enough that when it was allowed to move back down, it operated the rest of the pump. And the water piston was about 100 tons, the largest water piston ever created by mankind.
Wow, that is fascinating. So the water coming in is feeding this chamber underneath, which has this piston waiting, which is essentially giving it kinetic energy. It's pushing this piston back.
Mm-hmm.
As it pushes this piston back, it's creating a chemical reaction. And the chemical reaction is creating the pressure to push the piston back, which is pumping the water up out of this chamber. Out of the chamber.
Yeah, it's actually kind of more involved than really you can describe over the air. But the book goes into quite a bit of detail describing the whole process, and it gives a functional meaning to the odd passages and chambers inside the Great Pyramid, and where there was a sliding stone. Most of them have been destroyed through the ages, but you can see where the slots were for the sliding stones. You can see how that worked as a valve in this water pumping system. So hopefully people can look that over in my book and get an idea, a fresh idea about how the Great Pyramid was assembled, but also how it actually functioned and how it helped people, instead of just being a great big tombstone for a dead guy.
Right.
That which if to build another Great Pyramid might be anywhere from $20 to $50 billion. Okay, in modern money. To do that for a tomb, that would be stupid. That would be inappropriate. But see, the builders of the Great Pyramid were geniuses, and geniuses don't do stupid things. We have John Kennedy, who was a very popular leader and died. He's just in a little hole in the ground, All they're paying for is a little flame to keep burning.
Absolutely.
And Harry Truman, I've been to the Truman Library, and off to the side they got he's in just a hole in the ground when his wife is beside him. We didn't build, to spend half of our gross national product to make a tomb for the guy. That's nonsensical. That's not what geniuses do. So, and they didn't. The builders of the Great Pyramid didn't make the Great Pyramid so it can tell us something. Oh, we don't make anything. We have little time capsules, but they cost a few $100s. But we don't make something that costs $25 billion to tell a future generation that we know what gravity is, or that we know where a star is. But and that's the builders of the Great Pyramid were geniuses. They don't do stupid things.
Well, and my personal problem with seeing the pyramids as just a tomb is, I've considered it, but really the logistics of it is not only the amount of money and time spent in the construction of it, but if you analyze the construction and consider the length of time, yes, this may be a great leader. But look at how many years it takes to complete it.
I know. Yeah.
And really, by the time it would be finished, there would be no one alive who would have any memory of the leader that it was being built to commemorate.
That's actually a very good point. I may put that in a magazine article that I'm writing, so I will keep that in mind.
Right. I think of it like Kennedy. Or, excuse me, not Kennedy. I'm still thinking about the eternal flame there. But like Lincoln, considered to be a great leader, great president by many. But if, say, a monument for Lincoln was just being completed, it wouldn't have the, I mean, of course, everyone reveres the memory of Lincoln, but it wouldn't have the same significance today as it did, say, 150 years ago.
Right. That's right. So there's a lot of controversy about the tomb theory. Also, a lot of controversy about the Great Pyramid doesn't look like a tomb with all of these different passages and chambers. The Pharaoh only had one soul, so why does he need all these vents sticking out of it and everything? Egyptologists say, well, there was at least two changes of plans during mid-construction. Really? That's right. Because Egyptologists realize that they think it's a tomb, but it don't look like a tomb. Right. So then they just make up just pull it out of the hat. Oh, there was a change of plans because it doesn't look like what we presuppose that it is. So it's just strange. Egyptology started from the people that were tomb robbers. They would be funded by museums in Europe, and white Western European males would go over to Egypt and take whatever they could and put them in museums. And if you're a tomb robber and you look up and see the Great Pyramid, you're going to say, wow, that must be a tomb. Let me go in and see what I can take from it.
Right.
If you're a hammer, the world is a nail. Everything's a nail. Right. And if you're a tomb robber, boy, that must be a tomb. Let's go steal from it. But the things inside the Great Pyramid were stolen before the Egyptologists could steal them. So, oh well.
Right. And something else that comes to mind in thinking of it as a tomb is to look at what little is presumed about the the religion at the time. Of course, the Egyptians were very spiritual, and
sure,
they had a big belief in preparing someone for the afterlife, making their journey into the afterlife an easy transition, an easy journey. They, of course, there's been the studies done where they, during the mummification process, they didn't even though they removed the organs from the body, they didn't discard them. They put them in the clay jars and put them in the burial chambers. So they were all intact together. And they kept this to make that transition as easy as they could. So why would they put someone in this structure that has all of these confusing, winding passages that it would seem to me, and I could be completely wrong on this, this is just my speculation, but it would seem to me like they would think, if I put them, why would I put this person there? Are they going to get lost in these winding chambers, or do I want them to have a direct path from this site to the afterlife?
Right. The ancient Egyptians may have been very spiritual or whatever, but that doesn't mean that the Great Pyramid's purpose had anything to do with spirituality.
Right.
The United States is a Christian nation. The United States had the Hoover Dam built. That doesn't mean that the Hoover Dam is a Christian structure.
Right.
It has nothing to do with spirituality or anything else. And even if a spiritual civilization built the Great Pyramid, that doesn't necessarily imply that the Great Pyramid has a spiritual purpose. You could presuppose that, but that's not necessarily true.
That is a very, very good point. And from what you're saying, I mean, that's a very logical point and very well stated, because although yes, there are very spiritual people, but if this is indeed the reason the pyramid was built, then they're mistaking infrastructure for something sacred. It in all actuality, it would be the same as, someone, wanting to hold a religious service underneath a water tower.
That's right. That's right. But the Great Pyramid has been around for at least 45 centuries, but its days may be numbered because that ISIS organization over there is destroying a lot of temples and Buddhist statues and that type of thing in that region of the world. And if they ever get a chance, they will destroy the Great Pyramid because people consider that it is a spiritual building. Mm-hmm. And even today, people take spiritual journeys to hum or chant inside the Great Pyramid. Right. So if ISIS, which they do, understand that is being used for what they would consider pagan purposes, mm-hmm. then they will, if they ever get a chance, they will destroy the Great Pyramid. So it's unfortunate,
absolutely,
that people don't understand that it's more of a technical structure than it is a religious structure.
I agree, and I'm 100% a supporter of historical preservation, and to see the terrorist groups or any group for that matter, whether it group or individual that intentionally destroys historic sites, that's to me that's horrible.
It is, and it's too bad. It is bizarre that a religion can't just say, oh, well, that's like a historical structure and, no big deal, but they have to destroy it, Mm-hmm. So does that make those people a very spiritual people?
It calls a lot into question. It really does.
Yeah, it does. That's a good way to put it. That's for sure. Well, that's great. That's great. Anyway, our nonprofit foundation, what we're doing is trying to understand this technology, but try to build a pump and recreate this ancient technology that, again, the geniuses figured out a long time ago, and then adapt it for our modern uses, irrigation and the production of electricity, and that's what we're doing. So I want people to visit our website at thepump.org and seeing what we were doing, and give us an email. Let me know how we did on the interview, or if you have any questions about our research, you can certainly contact us through email. And also, if you're interested in what we're doing, let us know, and we can. You can be a co-researcher, an advisor, or get involved in some way. So I invite people to find out more about what we're doing. Don't just say yes or no, but be researchers yourself, and do the due diligence of research by reading my books and finding out some information. But it's people tell me every day, wow, that's a compelling theory. That's a lot of people are drawn to it.
Right.
Oh, that's how those stones were moved. I can see that. So, people that are dissatisfied with Egyptology and all of the mumbo jumbo and religion and everything, but then they can't actually physically move a stone in the real world. The people are so dissatisfied, and they're hungry for a new alternative to consider about these ancient wonders that virtually everyone is interested in. So I've really enjoyed being part of this process, this research. The writing the books, doing the interviews, and also magazine articles. So it's been a fun ride.
I can imagine, and I can definitely imagine some of the questions that that you get from this. And of course, it's hard to bring up the pyramid without bringing up a lot of the mysticism that comes up, because it's, there's so much that is really associated with it. And, of course, the pyramid has been actually studied, as people have actually taken the shape and tried to use it to harness energy. And I've seen experiments done with trying to harness EMF energy through conductors made in pyramid shapes and everything else. I was curious how often you get asked about things like that.
Oh yeah, pyramid power is yes, pyramid. I've got a little bit of an echo now.
Let me see if I can fix that. Okay, does that seem to be any better for you?
Oh, that's much better. That's great. Yes, people talk about. No, I'm still getting an echo. It's pretty bad.
I'll tell you what. We'll go to a little break real quick, and we'll see if we can fix the sound problem, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. So that gives everybody a chance to refill that coffee cup and do all that, and we'll get our technical difficulties taken care of and come back with a little more.
People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange. People are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. Women seem wicked when you're unwanted. Streets are uneven when you're down. When you're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange. Alright, yeah. You're strange, faces come out of the rain. When you're strange, no one remembers your name. When you're strange, when you're strange, when you're strange.
Teacher rap just in my bag.
Hi, this is Frank Lee, and you're listening to the Paranormal King Radio Network. Be sure to stay tuned for the best paranormal host, guest, and news from around the world. And don't forget, we bring you the best in music as well. Stay tuned, keep learning, and remember, the paranormal will never be the same. Welcome back. Hope everybody's got their coffee refilled or tea or whatever beverage they're sipping on tonight and ready to learn a little bit more. If you're just tuning in recently, we got Stephen Myers on the show, and it has been a lot of education in a little time, but it has been fascinating. So Stephen, we had talked a little bit about how the pyramid was built and what it was used for. And of course, it's, you know, kind of a rite of passage for doing a paranormal show. I figure we can get into some of the more mystical part of it, I guess. It's hard to think of ancient Egypt without thinking of a lot of the mythologies that go with it, and the mystical side of it, even down to the pyramid shape. So I was going to ask you some of your opinions on some of that. Personally, and I'll ask you this from maybe a mystical and a technological point of view. How do you feel about the pyramid shape in itself? Do you think it holds any special properties?
Well, there's been a lot of research in the 20th century about pyramid power, is I think what you're getting to. That the shape of the pyramid had some effect, like on razor blades, or keeping fruit fresh, or mummifying cats, that type of thing, or helped for health purposes. And actually, believe it or not, there is some promising research in that area with some controversial results, but I think that type of research should be pursued, and something may come of it. That's a possibility. Now, I think that the primary purpose that the Great Pyramid is shaped the way it is that it is like 4 hydroelectric dams back to back, if you will. And those dams that you see, the straight dams that go across a river, are flat with a sloping face on them, and those look surprisingly like the faces of pyramids. And if you had 4 of them back to back that impound water, you would have the pyramid shape. So that's the technical purpose, that it has a pyramid shape. But there may be some other more esoteric value to that shape, but I'm not for sure. But it needs more research.
Wow, that's something that I'd seen a little bit of the research that's been done on, but I find it quite fascinating, because it having that conical shape, it seems like if it were made of certain materials, how it could potentially work as an amplifier or a step-down transducer naturally. So it's quite fascinating.
It is fascinating.
That and of course we've talked about some fascinating knowledge that dates back many centuries. And so I'm going to ask, in your opinion, where do you think the ancients might have got some of this knowledge? Do you think that they might have came up with it themselves, or do you think it might have been given to them from some kind of outside influence, or even extraterrestrial influence, or whatever?
Well, this Great Pyramid certainly exhibited some high technology, and that technology may have came from ancient aliens, that type of thing, and that's a possibility. It's hard to tell where knowledge came from, but it also came probably from somebody that was just a genius, like a Nikola Tesla, that lived and figured it all out. There's nothing to preclude that possibility. So it either came from ancient aliens or a Nikola Tesla type of person, and it also may have existed before the last catastrophe, maybe even before the last flood type of thing, and it would have been from a highly technical society. So where the knowledge came from is very hard to determine.
Right, and that's very true, that it's hard to really say. But like you'd mentioned, the Nikola Tesla, or even one of my favorite scientists to research is Da Vinci. I mean, some of his inventions that, and I believe personally because of his flying machines that he had invented, and he was so into both art and science, and in such a creative way that he was just one of my personal favorites. But that's very well possible.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, someone like that who came up with all these ideas, that type of thing, could have been someone in the ancient civilization that built the Great Pyramid, and who that was is under debate. So that, or possibly some alien influence, and also if you consider the Bible account of people living a long time, imagine a Nikola Tesla with a productive career of 700 years.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
That is an excellent point. And to imagine, just the amount of knowledge that, that some of these people have gained over an 80, 90-year lifespan, and then think of that over several hundreds of years. That's just phenomenal, and that's a very, very good point.
Yeah, isn't that a fascinating possibility? But it's hard to say where it came from. But again, we want to use this ancient technology that, people talk a lot about ancient technologies and that type of thing. Well, we think the Great Pyramid exhibits a whole host of ancient technologies, maybe pyramid power, this water pumping technology. Even the extremely strong bonding agent is a high technology from ancient times. The bonding agent between the stones is known for being stronger than the stones itself. So there's a lot of unbelievably interesting and varied ancient technologies associated with the Great Pyramid.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I've got a question from the chat. What is your personal opinion on UFOs? Do you think that they exist and might have had any interaction with Earth?
Well, I actually haven't seen a UFO, or haven't had an encounter or anything like that. But I'm open to. I'm a guy who thinks the Great Pyramid was a water pump, so I'm open to ideas.
Right, absolutely.
And, some of the UFOs may be produced terrestrially.
Okay, I've lost my connection, so let me see if I can get him back here. Okay, and we are back. I believe that what happened was I had talked about aliens, and I think they might have zapped us for talking about them. I'm not quite sure, but
that could be, or maybe the powers that be didn't want us to talk about this technology that people could use to generate electricity so they wouldn't have an electric bill. So who knows, but we're back. And we were talking about UFOs, and it's a possibility that those things exist.
Absolutely, and I think that's what happens. I think that's what happens when you have Men in Black listening to your radio show and you talk about aliens. They shut you down.
That could be.
So, anyway, but yes, I definitely, I'm much like you. I believe that I've never personally had any type of encounter, but to say that there aren't aliens out there, or even that they've had some kind of influence, I wouldn't write it off. I would say anything's possible. So, and we even got to thank you aliens out there for letting us get back broadcasting.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Well, we're back at her now.
Right. So good deal. Let's see. I forgot. Okay. Yeah, I did get that question in there. So we let me see, and we did talk about that with aliens, of course. Now, looking back at some of the research you've done, we were talking earlier in the chat room about, and I haven't looked this up to see, but I know that there have been quite a few of the archaeological sites throughout Egypt that have been covered with years and years of sand that's blown over them, covered them up just with feet and feet that have buried them. I believe someone had mentioned a big flood that hit Egypt in, I think, the 17th century, and just so many disasters. So that would kind of make me wonder how much of those type of instances are you aware of that might have covered up things that would keep us from seeing much more, that would lead to us knowing more than we do now about the Great Pyramid and the area around it?
Well, there's been a lot of things that keeps us from knowing. The passage of time has certainly caused great destruction through natural events, but also through the loss of people's experience. There's no account written down that we know of people that worked on the Great Pyramid. There's nothing like that. Mm-hmm. There's a few legends that have been passed down, but there's no documentation, no hieroglyphs that show any pyramid being built in the Valley of the Nile. So, and then the loss of everything that's not as permanent as the Great Pyramid. That's why it's still there, is because of its permanence. But all of the tooling for surveying, for stone cutting, the machines, whatever they were, no barge exists that was used on the Great Pyramid. There are a few barges that are depicted in walls of tombs, that type of thing. Some look like they're rather symbolic, if you will. So there's so many pieces of the puzzle that are missing, and so much more to be discovered in the sands of Egypt, and so much information and misinformation to transcend that people like me and other alternative researchers have a lifetime of work to accomplish. So hopefully the veil of misunderstanding will be lifted slowly but surely, and one day we'll know the exact particulars of many things from ancient Egypt.
Absolutely. And That's something I've often wondered about, is exactly what and how much of it is buried in that sand out there. What is covered up under just, under so many feet of the dirt and sand that's been blown around for centuries.
Right. Even in the 1990s, there have been discoveries of major tombs, that type of thing. Some are late dynasty or even early Christian era, but still tombs, a lot of wooden coffins type of thing with the face of the person that died painted on them, and just a wonderful amount of artifacts still being found after all these years. And I invite everyone listening, if they ever get a chance, to go to Egypt. I mean, it's just there's no place like it in the world. It's fairly safe, probably safer than going to Chicago, but the people of Egypt are very friendly. They can all speak English, and they are accommodating to tourists. Tourism has been the leading industry in Egypt for 4,000 years. So they can handle tourism. The exchange rate is very favorable, which is a way of saying that when you get there, things are quite cheap. My motel room was a 2-room suite with a view of the Great Pyramid, and it was like $35 a night, and it had marble floors, French provincial furniture, and a large balcony, and it was wonderful. And the meals are cheap, and the cab rides are cheap, so it's affordable place to visit, and the sights and the sounds and the smells and the food, it's wonderful. If you ever get a chance, you got to go see those monuments, tombs, pyramids in person, just to get an idea of what an engineering feat it is to accomplish to build one of those things. Just not the pyramids are huge in and of themselves, but one of the things that impressed me was the size of just the components.
Right.
Were monstrous. So it's just a phenomenal, interesting thing that our ancient ancestors did. People are the same now as they've always been, but they had an idea or an inkling or goal to build those things, and they still exist today.
Absolutely. And that's what I was just thinking as you were talking about. That was the size of it. That is one thing that I've always heard. I've had several friends that have visited Egypt, and they've went to see the pyramids and toured that particular area. And that's the one thing that every single one of them have always told me, is that you can't appreciate the scale or the magnitude until you're there in front of it. And they say that then it is just breathtaking.
It is. It's mind-boggling, just the amount of effort that went into them, but just the mystery that surrounds the pyramids, these structures, and nothing about them is settled except for their location. But when they were built, even who built them, how it was done, it's all up to debate, and it's just overwhelming in its mystery. A lot of the things that were made much later, let's say in the Middle Ages, up to the Industrial Revolution, there's no controversy how books were bound, or a coopersmith made its products, or how barrels were made, because you can go to places like Colonial Williamsburg on the East Coast, where they have living museums. They have people that make books and make paper, and all all of those things. And the things that they make are just like the original artifacts, just like ancient books and that type of thing. Those are the real scientists, because they are using the scientific method to demonstrate how it was done. And Egyptology, by contrast, doesn't do any of that. They'll do some drawings, they'll do some computer-generated animations for their TV shows, but they don't do any real thing out in the real world to justify the ideas that they come up. An Egyptologist is someone that the biggest stone they've ever moved was the one in their kidney.
Right. I love that analogy. For the record, I'm going to borrow that one. So
go for it.
It's okay. I'll give you credit though. So don't.
Oh, that's fine. Oh yeah.
But I do agree when you have those. When you have that living museum, that it's, there is that replicability. That not only has it been repeated, you walk in and right in front of anyone's eyes, you see it being repeated. It's right there.
Yes, and when people repeat demonstrations, then that reduces the amount of controversy. Like there's the mole test for the hardness of different stones. They scrape two stones together and you can tell which one's harder than the other. And diamonds have a certain hardness value, and other stones, soapstones. There's no controversy about the hardness of stones because it can be demonstrated. That's the point of using the scientific method. It's to reduce controversy and to justify your hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And Egyptology doesn't do that. It is so strange that, and with a straight face, they teach this stuff in college about making casing stones by hand, but and nobody calls them on it. Nobody holds their feet to the fire and says, how can they do that? It's just sad.
Right.
It's detrimental to seeking truth, this type of thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree, because that's something that, across any technical field, any scientific field, that's the basic fundamental of the scientific method is, can you duplicate it? Can you repeat the results? Can you test this? And they're completely skipping that. And it's like we had mentioned early on in the show. If if we see the process that they've shown described in the textbooks and different places like that, where they're rolling the giant stones that have been cut on these logs and everything, just one demonstration of that would be
would be marvelous,
right? But even with modern technology, they're not doing it.
Yeah, if you watch the demonstrations they do provide on TV documentaries, you have to realize that cranes and forklifts are right off camera. And they move stones that weigh less than the smallest stones of the Great Pyramid, and they move them a few feet and then say, oh, that's how it was done. Well, the measure of how the stones were moved is in how the largest stones were moved, not the smallest ones. Because actually, I can pick up a full-size car, okay? Mm-hmm. And I can do it. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing. And I will demonstrate it to you by picking up a Hot Wheels car. Mm-hmm. Not very impressive, is it?
Right.
Not a very impressive demonstration. Scale is an issue, and also precision. They'll essentially bust two stones apart and say, "Oh, that's how the stones were cut." But the precision is completely different than the extreme precision of the stones cut the Great Pyramid than what Egyptology comes up with. And, it's just not good science at all. So, the listeners need to be aware of Egyptology, how it does a fast shuffle with the evidence and shucking and jiving with the truth. And if they're confronted by an Egyptologist, ask them about that. Ask them why they can't do anything. And they're professional experts, but the people that did it, they say were working people and peasants. So, what's going on here?
Well, and something else that I wanted to ask you about is you hear so much about astrological alignments of the pyramids and a lot of the monuments in Egypt, and what's your findings from that on your research?
Well, there is a theory called the Orion correlation theory, where the vents point to certain stars. Actually, those vents don't point to those stars right now. But if you add the variable of time and dial back the sky, if you will, because the stars move across the sky over the eons, the grand precession, if you will, the precession of the equinoxes. If you add the variable of time and move the sky back to a certain time that you want to, then yes, the vents point actually towards, not exactly, but towards those stars. But there's no feature of the Great Pyramid which indicates that there was any intent by the builders to point to those stars. Even though Orion was important, that doesn't mean that the builders intended that. There's a correlation certainly between the vent and the star if you think the Great Pyramid was built when those two line up, if you will. Because the Great Pyramid could have been built 50,000 years ago, not just 4,500 when this alignment occurs. But there's no causation, if you will. There's no nothing to corroborate that was their intent.
Right.
So I think that there is a logical fallacy in that research. They're saying Orion is important, and if you use this variable of time, you can get the vent to point to that star. But that doesn't mean that it was intended.
Right.
Just like something on the Hoover Dam you can get to correlate with, let's say, Jesus, okay? Like you can add up the number of generators and then divide that by 3 because of the Trinity, and then you can come up with no, seriously. Right. Then you can times that by 12 because there's 12 disciples, and then you multiply that by 66 because there's 66 books in the Bible. And then you get a number that might be the date that Jesus was born, okay?
Right.
There's a correlation, but there's no causation. Okay? There's nothing specific to the Great Pyramid that indicates that the builders intended the vents to point to stars. There's no feature that indicates that they intended to do that. Also, there's no feature of the Great Pyramid that indicates that it's a religious building. There's no religious symbol. There's nothing. Even though it's a religious society, just like our civilization at least was when the Hoover Dam was built, that doesn't make the Hoover Dam a religious building.
Right.
And there's no feature of the Great Pyramid that indicates that the Great Pyramid was intended to be symbolically interpreted. There's nothing, unless of course that feature is symbolic. And if it is, then you have circular reasoning. So there's been a lot of mileage by authors and TV documentaries about all these alignments, and you can see them and everything. But that doesn't mean that those correlations were intended by the original builders. There's a correlation between pirates and global warming. Yes, since the 1600s, there's Wikipedia pages about it, magazine articles about this correlation. It's a very precise correlation between pirates and global warming. The less pirates we've had since the 1600s, the more global warming we've had. And the chart for that, they have a chart and everything, is very precise. The only thing is, even though it's a precise correlation, there's no causation.
Right.
So everybody knows that that's a false correlation. Well, people just believe that the vents were intended to point to stars, and then they believe that it was built in this certain time. So they've added all of these presuppositions and variables, and then come up with this very convoluted, if you will, and complex theory about all these alignments of this, that, and the other. What's interesting is 100 years ago, there was a different correlation theory associated with the Great Pyramid, and that was the biblical correlation theory, where people saw or come up with correlations between the Great Pyramid and the Bible. That's called pyramidology. You can word search that. I mean, there's books, and even people today think that there's a correlation, that the Great Pyramid was a Bible in stone, and they use the pyramid inch, and they can predict when World War I is, World War II, the creation, when Noah lived. And there's all these features and measurements and on and on and on. The only thing is, it's all bogus, because there's no correlation to justify no causation to verify the correlation. So just because there's a correlation doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. And that goes against the grain of a lot of people, because the Orion correlation theory is very popular now. But I think that it has some logical fallacies that are fundamental to the research, and a whole host of presuppositions that are not supported by evidence. So that's my take on the Orion correlation theory. And also, where does it go? Where does it lead to? Yeah, the vents point to stars, but did they build this great big thing so something can point to something?
Absolutely. And,
what
would be the point?
It's just like Egyptology. It's stagnant. I mean, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. People, almost every day, people will play with the numbers, use any unit of measure they want to, and do the math and all of that, and come up with a correlation between the curvature of the Earth and something about the Great Pyramid, and then they get a wide-eyed expression and say profound. Well, that's nice if the curvature of the Earth correlates to something with the Great Pyramid, but is there some feature that indicates a causation between the two, and there is not. It's just something that people come up with. So I think that it is a mystery religion, and the way that they worship is to come up with correlations, and their nirvana is to say profound. And the Great Pyramid is, to the Orion correlation theory proponents, is a deity that is inerrant. It never makes a mistake. All these correlations about everything, the stars, the Earth, everything, they're all precise. So the Great Pyramid never makes a mistake, and the Great Pyramid is all-knowing.
Right.
It knows everything. So I think that the Orion correlation theory is a mystery religion. And it doesn't accomplish anything, it doesn't help anything, and it is also unable to address how the Great Pyramid was built, which is okay to know. All they do is they consider the Great Pyramid as a pre-existent artifact and try to divine meaning from it by measuring it and coming up with angles and stuff. So that's my take on the Orion correlation theory.
And that's fascinating. And I love the way that you put that, because if you look hard enough, you can find correlation with anything.
Yes,
and
everything. There's the what they call Manhattan hinge. The streets of Manhattan line up with the sun on a particular day.
Mm-hmm.
It has a name, and it actually does line up. Except there's no causation. I mean, nobody intended that. I mean, it's no big deal. The Arc de Triomphe in Paris lines up with the sun on a particular day. You can see on the web pictures of the arch. You look right through it, and there's the sun. But there's no significance to that. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, even though it's in alignment. The spikes on the Statue of Liberty, all the spikes point to stars because they point up. And with the variable of time, you can pick out any old star you want it to be significant. And the alignment is precise, but, what is the significance? Yes, everything lines up to something. Empire State Building, the top of it points to a star. Every flagpole points to a star.
Mm-hmm.
But the causation is the critical factor to see if it's significant or not. And the human mind has a propensity to see order where it isn't. Where if there's an alignment, then great, but there has to be some way to validate the correlation. A correlation is not self-validating. That is a logical error to do that. To say, well, it lines up, so it must have been intended. Well, not necessarily.
That's right. Well, and something that I want to run by you personally is you talking about the Orion correlation theory and the way it is used. I can't help but wonder if, and I just want to get your opinion, maybe some researchers maybe they realize how much of it is empty correlation and doesn't really hold any causation or validity to it, but have kind of promoted the mysticism that it brings about in that theory to kind of help fill holes or gaps in their research that couldn't be explained otherwise.
Well, I'm sure that there are authors that are proponents of the Orion correlation theory, and we've all read the books and seen the TV documentaries, but people need to I don't know what authors' motivations are. That would be not prudent for me to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone that presents an idea like myself are kind of like doctors, and then we present our ideas to regular people who are like patients, if you will. And I suggest to anybody, get a second opinion. Read what somebody says, like about the Orion correlation theory, and consider it, instead of just accepting it as gospel,
mm-hmm.
to really analyze what it means and where that theory actually goes, and then get a second opinion. Also, you need to look at other books like mine,
right,
and get an idea, of a different slant on this same direct evidence that everybody else has. So that's what I suggest to people, especially in regards to Egyptology, the Orion correlation theory, and the pretty much You should become familiar with the pyramidology about the Bible and the Great Pyramid, just to understand a mindset that people have to come up with all of these correlations. So, I'm just a humble researcher, but I expect other people to conduct research. You'd be surprised how many people say, "Oh, I saw the TV documentary and I could see that those vents point to stars, so I don't have to do any more research." Well, everyone does a different level of research, so I just hope that people are diligent in seeking the truth. And that's probably the most revolutionary thing I could tell anybody, is to seek truth and read books.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's some advice that I give to people quite often themselves when it comes to doing paranormal research, is because very similar to what you're talking about. There's so many theories that have been passed around. And I encourage people, educate yourself, do your own research, before you get out there and accept what you've seen here, or maybe hear as truth. Study it and put your nose in the books. Put your own theories together, test it out, try it, and see what you come up with for yourself. And it's that's some of the best advice that, like you're saying, that's how different opinions are formed. That's how misinformation stops being passed around, is through independent research.
That's for sure. And all ideas that are accepted at one time were considered blasphemy, including that the Earth goes around the sun, or that bread mold could make sick people well. Right. A guy came up with that idea, and his name was Alexander Fleming, and he figured out penicillin. And it was a battle. If you ever read about that, it was a battle for the medical community to accept that. Oh, that won't work. Or they'll say, well, we've never used that before. We don't need that. And it took him 20 years to finally get the medical community to accept it. But what happened was World War II happened, and the military was very interested in how to make people with infections get well. And they were responsible for helping to make penicillin more available, and they also developed sulfur drugs that were a wonder drug at the time, and because there was a huge need for those types of medicines. But the medical community, the experts, were drugged their heels. Almost took them a whole generation to accept penicillin. It's interesting about the Piltdown skull. The Piltdown skull was discovered, and the best experts in the world on anthropology said, "Oh yeah, that's a missing link right there." They instantly accepted it because of their mindset. They didn't even see the file marks on the jaw of the Piltdown skull. And it was accepted for a full generation. It took about 40 years for people to say, oh, no, that's not, the Piltdown skull isn't authentic. And what happened was, all the experts that accepted it, none of them changed their minds. What happened was they died off. And then the new generation of anthropologists, starting out, they said, oh, no, that Piltdown skull is a forgery. Or a hoax. So neither group changed their mind. So for this research to really take hold, it might take a whole generation for Egyptologists and other people to die off, and a new generation of young people, to read my books or to watch the. We have a documentary that I did with Dr. Robert Schock, to watch that, or our video series on the web. and young people with a fresh idea, and I think it will catch on. It really will, just like you with an open mind who have considered it to be viable. So,
right. Well, the way I look at it is, and this is something that I've talked to people who were skeptic of the type of research that I do.
Yes,
I don't mind bringing up the fact that Copernicus, essentially the father of modern astronomy, the guy who basically put forth the theory that the sun is the center of our solar system here instead of the Earth, he was put before the Inquisition and nearly burned at the stake for his theories.
Yeah, the world isn't as accepting of new ideas as you would think they ought to be, and a lot of people have a vested interest in the old ideas, if you will. And if I make all books about Egyptology obsolete, that's probably not a popular thing in some circles.
Right.
Egyptology doesn't even say that I'm wrong. There's like a wall of silence. They won't even say or even mention my books, or even say, well, there's a nut that thinks the Great Pyramid's a water pump. They won't even say it. I mean, it's a wall of silence.
Absolutely. I've got a question from chat that is that is interesting here. It's about the 5 connecting pyramids from China to Egypt, how they're positioned in a straight line. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a whole bunch of pyramids out there. Why pick those 5? Maybe the other pyramids were supposed to be in a straight line, but they weren't. Mm-hmm. What can they show that indicates that there was an intent for that to occur?
Mm-hmm.
They don't pick the other pyramids that aren't in a straight line and say, well, they were supposed to, but they got it wrong. The pyramids are like dots around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you look at all the dots and you look at every single one and every single possibility, and pretty soon you find some that line up.
Absolutely.
But what is there an intent to that? If there is, why don't you have him tell us? Instead of just saying, well, they line up, and say profound. I mean, that doesn't get us anywhere.
Right. And I know that there was also a question about the Mayan pyramids. Now, I know that with the Mayan pyramids and some of the pyramids found in South America, I know that there are believed to be many that are undiscovered. I've got a friend who just a couple of months ago returned from a trip to Peru, who was describing a pyramid that they had recently discovered there.
Mm-hmm.
Who and was describing the way that the terrain, there's so much growth, and between the between the natural layers of topsoil that have covered a lot of the sites over the area, and then the growth, of course, and the deterioration of the old growth and the new growth, that they believe that there are hundreds and hundreds in those areas that remain undiscovered. So it does make sense that some of those kind of have that connect the dot type situation.
Yes,
going.
They're using satellite imagery, believe it or not, for finding pyramids in South America. But they better start looking really quick, because recently a pyramid in South America was destroyed. There was a building site near it. They were building something, and they used the pyramid for fill. It was like a quarry. They took a backhoe and took that rock to fill up for a construction site. So,
wow.
Pyramids, they do come and they go. So it's a strange world that they would do such a thing like that.
Absolutely. And just have you had the opportunity to do much research on the Chinese or the Mayan pyramids?
Actually, the Mayan pyramids are beyond the scope of my research. I just primarily how a specific construction site was built, the Great Pyramid, and how it was built and why it was built. But people don't need to buy my books. They're certainly just go to the library and that type of thing. We also have archived other podcasts that people can listen to get some more information. So I just again suggest people conduct research and learn as much as they can and make a wise and informed decision from knowledge that they've learned.
Absolutely. And I will say my personal opinion about the Chinese pyramids is, of course, the terrain that they lie in. It's a mountainous region for most of them, and there's a lot of vegetation. And it would be very easy if you look at that terrain. There very well may be many there as well that are still undiscovered.
In China?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, actually, because China is not really open, if you will, for it's not a free country, believe it or not.
Right.
By any sense of the imagination, and the last 60 years, professional excavation has not been a priority for that country.
Mm-hmm.
So there's much research that needs to be conducted on their pyramids. There's just a few random photographs that are available on the web. Certainly I have been to Egypt, but I haven't been to China to look at those pyramids, how they're made or anything. But again, more research needs to be conducted in that area, and probably some interesting discoveries will be found.
Absolutely. That's one place where we're fortunate with having the openness and the ability to do the research in Egypt that we are, because like you were talking about with China not being open, from what I understand, outside of the government, there aren't many people allowed to do research in China, period. And
that's correct. Yes, and its country is very backward in terms of their archaeological discoveries in the area of pyramids. So being a pyramid enthusiast, it's a tragedy that, in fact, one pyramid, you could see that they planted trees on it, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
The trees are evenly spaced. And got to get some use out of it, I guess. So it's a strange world in regards to what people think are valuable and what people don't have an interest in.
Absolutely. So and going back to ancient Egypt, do you have any particular theories about some of the other structures, like perhaps the Sphinx?
Well, the Sphinx is actually quite interesting. Not very far from the Great Pyramid, within walking distance. It's just right there, and I have a picture of myself with the Sphinx. I'm the one with the nose. Anyway, but the Sphinx traditionally was thought to be about the same age as the pyramids within a generation or two that it was built. But the very important work of Dr. Robert Schoch, who is a geologist, works at the Boston University, he observed the weathering pattern of the rocks in the Sphinx enclosure, if you will, and also on the Sphinx itself. Mm-hmm. So his contention is that the Great Pyramid, the Sphinx was built much earlier than traditional Egyptologists feel it was. And I tend to agree with him. And with the debate of the age of the Sphinx being hotly debated, I think that the age of the pyramids in general, and the Great Pyramid specifically, is under scholarly debate. So that is interesting. If you ever get a chance, go to Egypt and see the Sphinx. It's awe-inspiring and wonderful. The largest stones on the Giza Plateau are in the Sphinx enclosure, about 200 tons.
Wow.
And the largest stones of the Great Pyramid are 70 tons. So that gives you an idea.
Wow, that's just absolutely amazing.
Yes, it is amazing.
And now I'm not sure how correct this is. Now I've heard a theory once that the Sphinx originally had a goatee that extended to the ground, and one of the pharaohs had it removed. Now, do you know anything about if that holds any validity to it?
My understanding is, yes, the Sphinx had a goatee at one time, and I don't know when, but it was busted off. I believe that there's pieces of that stone goatee available for viewing at, I'm not sure which university or museum. I'm not exactly sure. A lot of the artifacts were taken from Egypt to museums in Europe. But my understanding is, yes, it had a goatee. It also, I believe, was painted, is my understanding, although it's not the focus of my research.
Right.
So that would be very striking. Other theories include that the Sphinx was recarved. The head of the Sphinx is out of proportion with the body. The body itself is like totally in proportion, but the head is much smaller. So some people think that the head was recarved, made smaller to be consistent with the pharaoh. Also, some of the weathering patterns indicate that is a possibility. That's what I've read. And there's also a hole in the top of the Sphinx head, and that may have been to support some sort of a headdress or that type of thing.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And now something I've always heard as well about the Great Pyramid was that it actually wasn't just a, everyone as you see it would see it as a just a standard triangular how am I trying to say it, as having all of the sides being flat.
Mm-hmm.
But that not being the case, that each side of it is actually that instead of it having the four sides, that it was actually almost octagonal shaped.
There is a slight crease on each face of the Great Pyramid from the apex down to the center of the base, and it's kind of indented in, if you will, kind of caved in, creased in, is the best way to put it. And yes, the Great Pyramid has that feature. It makes the construction of the Great Pyramid seemingly much more complex for just a slight depression in the middle, like just a few feet, and it's very hard to notice except when the sun is on it just right, because one side is illuminated by the sun and the other side of one face is in shadows. But my book talks about that in great deal. What that does is act similar to a hydroelectric dam, similar, I say, by being bent in. It helps with the force of the water that's being impounded inside the Great Pyramid, between all the cracks in the stones of the interior stones. All that hydrostatic force is pushing against the casing stones, and to have them bend in makes the sides of the Great Pyramid stronger during construction. And I have a whole chapter about that in my first book, Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid.
Huh.
And so that's what we think. It was a feature that was necessary in the construction to make the sides stronger using the construction method that we think that was used.
Okay, so in other words, reinforce it maybe to keep the water pressure, as the altitude of the water puts a greater pressure on the sides, maybe.
Yes.
Keep the sides from buckling.
Yes, keep them from buckling. That's exactly correct. And anyway, that's the direct physical evidence about this unusual feature in the Great Pyramid, with each side with this crease. And then I've offered an explanation for that gives a functional meaning to why it was done, and also is consistent with the explanation of how the Great Pyramid was built.
Absolutely, because if the pyramid was a hollow structure, or just, wasn't contained, just used as a building or whatever, if you will, then the only force to be considered in the design of it would be mainly the force of gravity, in which case a standard flat-sided structure would have worked.
Absolutely.
Because it would only have the outward and downward pressure. However, if it's being filled with water, then it's having the gravitational force from the outside along with having pressure from the inside. So it would need that reinforcement. So that makes sense.
That is correct, and I appreciate that confirmation.
So that's so even if the listeners are completely lost, at least I know a little bit about hydraulics and pressure, so I'm following you there.
Our video series at our website at thepump.org shows a lot about how water was impounded by the casing stones, and how the whole process was completed to build the Great Pyramid. So I invite people to watch our video series and give us an email, send us an email, and let us know what they think about that explanation of how the Great Pyramid was built.
Absolutely. That I know I will be checking them out, and because I'm just fascinated by the whole theory, and I find it amazing. It's the first one that I've heard that actually makes sense from all angles. So I will definitely be checking out those videos, and maybe some of the modern designers can that's something that I was just thinking about, is you see a lot of times when modern designers will look back to ancient architecture, ancient civilizations, and if this proves to be true, who knows if this might not show up in modern design in the future.
Absolutely. The Great Pyramid is ultra modern in its design, without any ornamentation inside or out. There's no depiction of gods. There's no statuary. There's even no steps inside it. And it was a ultra modern yet built in ancient times machine. And this machine was a water pump, and that's why they built it as a huge investment that paid off 10,000 times over. Just like hydroelectric plants do, just like roads. Our infrastructure is roads, but you see all these trucks going by, transporting stuff and using these roads, and that they use the infrastructure to make prosperity, to make money, to run their businesses for sales. And that's, the road is just a road, but how it's used is what provides the prosperity. And the Great Pyramid is a pump, and then the water that it pumps is used to make prosperity for the civilization that built it. So that's our contention.
Absolutely. And it's like I say, that's one of the few theories that I've heard that actually makes sense from all angles. So I'm going to be checking out the videos and looking at those, because what knowledge I have of hydraulics and water distribution systems, I can see it being possible.
Well, I appreciate you looking at the videos, and with your expertise, I would be thrilled that you watch them, and you would be almost like a peer review for you to evaluate how the stones were moved, how they were moved on and off of barges set in place, and that type of thing. So, it's a complex structure, and it also used a kind of a unique construction process to bring the Great Pyramid into reality.
I agree, and I would be glad to, I would be glad to check it out and offer what knowledge I have on it and review that for you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome. But I find it fascinating, and the efficiency of it. When you consider all angles, I mean, the Nile was so much closer to the area at the time. We know how much it's receded over the centuries, and then you consider how efficient a barge is for moving a large load.
Absolutely.
It just makes sense. And not only that, but what would be their water source? I mean, obviously that region needed a source of water to be a thriving civilization, and they needed a massive one.
Yes. They had the Nile River, and but there was also the ancient Lake Maurice that's on the same side of the river as the Great Pyramid, and Herodotus talked about canals that were in that area, and he also talked about the Great Pyramid having a artificial duct hooked up to it. So there's some contention that the water source was from this ancient Lake Maurice. It's still there, but it's much smaller, and it goes by an Arab name that I can't pronounce. Doesn't matter. But anyway, you can see it on a map if you look on the map. And also there's some scholarly debate among people that are into this direction of research as to how the water got to the Giza Plateau. But from the Giza Plateau, again, the water entered the descending passage into the water pump and then exited up through the King's Chamber vents and then was delivered to the point of use.
Right. That's fascinating because you never hear much about the lake. You always hear about the Nile, but there's not mention of it in many sources at all, and that's something to consider because throughout history, no matter which civilization you want to study, there are very, very few thriving civilizations that aren't near a major water source.
Absolutely, that's for sure. And that is one of the primary criteria for civilizations, and that's why we dam rivers and use the hydroelectricity to move water to where we need it. Like Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. We dam the river at the Hoover Dam, and then use the electricity from the dam to pump water to Las Vegas, and then create prosperity. So the ancients, geniuses, I believe, did the same thing. They created this water pump that was used for their prosperity. Even though you have the Nile River and the water is down in the Nile, it's not going to help. Water in the river don't help.
Right.
Ask any farmer, and most farmers have two pumps that are connected in series. They have a pump that pumps from the river up to a tank, and they use a pump that has high volume but low lift, if you will, and then they store water in a tank, and then from there they pump water that has a high lift and not as high volume to the irrigation system. So there's some technical issues about all of this that lend credence to this technical explanation of the Great Pyramid. And again, I hope people find out more. There's like 2 books worth of information, and I'm actually writing a number of magazine articles that have been published in just a number of magazines. The interest is very high, and with this fresh explanation of the same direct physical evidence that everyone has. So I want people to join in and become aware of the research we're conducting. Absolutely.
Let me see, and you've got the link to the Facebook page for the radio show. So by all means, any magazine articles that you get, anything like that, definitely keep us posted, because I'm fascinated by this, and I know that our listeners are as well. So we would love to stay up to date on it.
Well, great. Yes, I'll add some links. I'll send them to you about some magazine articles that are available and our television documentary that we did. And we also have a DVD documentary that's available commercially. Oh, so that may be of interest to people. They can watch it on the big screen with the on DVD. So there's a lot going on that we're doing. We're doing ongoing research. We're also, like any nonprofit foundation, be it hospital, Girl Scouts, or university, we are raising funds. We are using crowdfunding to purchase a 3D printer for our research facility. Oh, wow. And information for that can be found on our website at thepump.org. We're about halfway for our funding goal to get a 3D printer, and then we can print some components for the water pump and that type of thing. So there's a lot going on. And we are just recently did a fundraising grant proposal to get a plasma cutter for our facility as well. So we're equipping our facility. We are doing fundraising. We're getting materials to build the pump and proof of concept model. And there's a lot going on, and we're having a lot of fun doing it.
Absolutely. I can imagine it's got to be thrilling. And hopefully the funding will be there to get the 3D printer. That's something that I want personally is a 3D printer. I'm amazed by those. Looking at the technology, I've seen, I've seen a video not too long ago where they printed a 3D car.
Yes.
They 3D. I seen a video. I want to say it was in Japan, where they were 3D printing small modular houses.
Yes, it would, instead of print out plastic, it would print out cement, and then make the walls and everything. Yeah, it's a marvelous technology, and we would really like to have one of those for our research facility, and hopefully we can get the funding for that through crowdfunding. The research is so controversial that it's been difficult to get a huge amount of funding. We have some grassroots people, we have volunteers, we have pro bono legal counsel. We also have some advisors, technical advisors, co-researchers, a board of directors. So there's some things going on, and we're conducting research every day, and doing wonderful shows like this that are so valuable to get the word out. And it's been a wonderful experience. A lot of guys my age buy a motorcycle and relive their childhood. Well, I ended up with this unusual hobby that's become a life quest for me, and I'm really glad that I got involved in what I'm doing. I think that ultimately we are going to make a difference.
Absolutely, and hopefully you'll find some more funding, and hopefully through some of the people listening to this show and hearing this, that will get some more support out there, get the word out, because this is such a revolutionary new idea that the thing that I really like about it is it makes sense, and it's like we had talked about before the show began. It's so simple that it's easy to overlook some of the things that are so simple.
It is, and we've developed. It's a simple idea, but we've developed it to a great degree, and also we've tied it in with features of the Great Pyramid. It's not just a theory that's a standalone theory, but it describes all of these features of the Great Pyramid that seem to be consistent with this idea of how the Great Pyramid was assembled. So it's just getting the word out. Again, more and more people are, the word is compelling that I hear all the time, and so it's been fun. There's certainly been some resistance from some people with a vested interest. They've already written their books about the Great Pyramid being a Death Star or a tomb or whatever, and that's fine. But a lot of people, and open-minded people without a position to maintain, have been very receptive to what we're doing and the research that we're conducting. So I'm glad, pleasantly surprised that you are saying such kind words about this research.
Well, I find it, like I said, completely fascinating, and it adds up. It makes sense. It's to me, it just comes across as being logical. So that's something that you don't find very much, especially when dealing with such a location that's got such a past in mysticism and legend and everything. So I rather enjoy a fresh approach to it.
Well, thank you. It is, like I say, it's been super fun, and I'm having the time of my life, doing a few lectures every so often, and also getting the word out. So I ask your listeners to like us on Facebook, or also tell their friends about our website at thepump.org, or to watch our video series, and or mention us in news groups or forums that they are involved in. So that would be great, and it would be really helpful to help get the word out. That has been a struggle. So again, thank you for this wonderful show.
Well, you're quite welcome, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. Like I say, I found it intriguing, and I've really enjoyed it and learned quite a bit. And we're just about out of time, but before I go, I know your website is thepump.org.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you have a Facebook page as well. How could someone find it?
Just go to our website and click. The first link is to click to like us on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
So that's the best way. And we've been doing some. I've been actually doing some illustrations for a magazine article I'm writing, and been posting some of those illustrations on my timeline. So that's been generating some interest, and a few other things on Facebook. So we're active on Facebook. We do have the website. We even have, believe it or not, we even have a phone number that they can get a hold of us. That phone number is 541. Let me start over. 541-824-0032, and they can call us 24 hours a day. That's our kind of our hotline that they can leave a message if they want to. Our email address, of course, is info@thepump.org, and if they want to mail us, we have people mail us a lot of information, manuscripts, research materials for our research library. Our postal address is on our website too, so we are very accessible, and that's and we respond to our email because we are an educational nonprofit foundation. And if people have questions, they should give us a call or even email us, and we will try to answer anyone's questions that they have.
Awesome. That is great. Well, I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and like I say, I've learned so much. I know the people listening have, and I appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to updates, and definitely keep me posted, and we can get you back on again in the future, and kind of keep track and see how everything's going with you.
Oh, I would love that. I would be honored to be able to come back on your show.
Awesome. So we will be looking forward to that. So to everyone listening, we hope you've enjoyed the show tonight, and look forward to you tuning in next week. So have a good night, everyone, and keep listening after the outro goes off there. And I got a special song playing for some of our star pupils. So have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you for listening to Paranormalities and Ponderings with the C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team. Brought to you by the Paranormal King Radio Network. We hope you enjoyed the show, and will tune in again next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Please be safe as you're out there, especially if you're investigating the paranormal. Take care, have a good night, and happy hunting. C.A.S.P.I.R Paranormal team.
Wait a second, man. What do you think a teacher's gonna look like this here?
Teacher, stop that screaming. Teacher, don't you see? Don't wanna be no uptown fool. Maybe I should go to hell, but I'm doing well. Teacher needs to see me after school. I think of all the education that I missed, but then my homework was never quite like this. Oh, got it bad, got it bad, got it bad. I'm not the teacher. I've got it bad, so bad. I'm not the teacher.
I brought my pencil. Give me something to write on, man.
I heard about your lessons, but lessons are so cold. I know about this school. Little girl from Cherry Lawn, how can you be so bold? How did you know the golden rule? I think of all the education that I missed, but then my homework was never quite like this. Oh, got it bad, got it bad, got it bad. I'm not the teacher. I've got it bad, so bad. I'm not the teacher.
Oh man, I think the clock is slow. I don't feel dirty. Class dismissed.
Ooh, yeah. I've got it bad, got it bad, got it bad. I'm not the teacher. Oh, yes, I'm hot. Wow.
Network has the best hosts and guests the Paranormal has to offer. Every weekday, Mondays, 8 Eastern, Delaware Paranormal Princess Radio with Melissa Overton from the Paranormal Investigators of Delaware. Tuesday, 9 Eastern, Paranormalities Ponderings with the teacher Frank Lee from Central Alabama Society for Paranormal Investigations and Research. Wednesdays, 8 Eastern, Paranormal Experience with Catherine Hobson from Spirit Communications and Research, Alabama. Thursday, 8 Eastern, Paranormal King Radio, the Paranormal King himself, Ross Rapaza. Fridays, 8 p.m., Paraversal Universe with Kevin Malik and Jennifer Sclessie from Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society. Fridays, 11 Eastern, Dead Creek Radio, live with myself, Will Pritchard from Dead Creek Paranormal. We strive to bring you the best paranormal stories in an educational, informative, and entertaining manner, only on Paranormal King Radio Network, where the paranormal will never be the same again.
Hi, this is Frank Lee, and you're listening to the Paranormal King Radio Network. Be sure to stay tuned for the best paranormal host, guest, and news from around the world. And don't forget, we bring you the best in music as well. Stay tuned, keep learning, and remember, the paranormal will never be the same.